Namaste. This is Yoga Therapy Podcast, and I'm your host, Shira, yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and Ayurvedic wellness educator. In these conversations with experts in the field of yoga therapy, you'll find out what it is and how it can help you and your loved ones to reclaim well-being. We'll touch on physical as well as mental health, physiology, emotions, women's health, spiritual well-being, goddesses, and self-development in the fullest sense. Listening to another story can change ours, so thank you for showing up, and let's begin this journey together. Okay, hello everyone. So today we are here with the first male that I have on my podcast. So it's very exciting for me. His name is Brandt Passalacqua. He is a certified IOIT yoga therapist. He's a seasoned yoga therapist, so he's been doing this for 20 years. He runs a project called Breathing Deeply Yoga Therapy, and he's going to tell us all about this in the podcast. So welcome, and thank you for being here, Brandt. Really happy.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So just a little detail on the background. So I got a message from someone that Brandt wanted to be on, and I was like, well, I don't know who Brandt is. So he can write me himself if he wants to come on. So I'm sorry for that kind of arrogance, but there you are. Now we're here.
I wish I could do everything myself.
Yeah.
And I did for a long time. So I'm appreciative of help these days. I've surrendered to other people doing things. Finally.
No, very good. Well done. Yeah. So tell us about your yoga story and how it became yoga therapy, or maybe it was straight away.
Yeah. Well, sort of. Yeah. So I think like probably a lot of listeners who got into yoga, I had never heard of yoga. I saw yoga studios, and I knew some women, since you brought up my gender, who went, but I never had gone. This is a long time ago. And I got really sick, and I almost died, and I had an autoimmune disease. And
what was
recovering from that,
it
is autoimmune hemolytic anemia. It's basically you have antibodies to your own red blood cells.
Yeah.
It was kind of out of nowhere, although I was a musician who smoked 4 packs a day, drank all day, and was obese. So, saying that's out of nowhere is not really true.
Relevant.
But I hadn't been officially sick. So, I woke up one day and I was basically dying. And I went through a long illness with that. I actually got out of the hospital in New York September 10th, 2011. So like right before 9/11. The next morning at my house, when I woke up, that's what I was listening to. I actually thought I was hallucinating because I'd been in intensive care a long time. So it was a very strange time to recover. But my prognosis wasn't good. And so I was looking for alternative strategies rather than just lying around waiting for myself to lose organs or go blind or whatever the next thing was. That didn't seem like a good option to me. And so I found yoga, and I found the practice of yoga Nidra, actually. And I couldn't walk well, and I couldn't really do anything because I was dizzy all the time. So I ended up doing yoga Nidra basically all day, like on and off all day, and had like really amazing results with it.
Wow. And can you tell me the time frame of that? How long were you hospitalized?
Well, I was hospitalized for many weeks in the ICU.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they sent me home, and it was kind of like I was on mega doses of steroids, and they were like, well, we'll wean you also these. And then I got on I'm 50. So this is over 20 years ago. And I got on a Yahoo group, which was the only thing then for other people that had this condition, and like they were dying or like their organs were being, it was not good. So I got off the Yahoo group. I was like, this isn't really helpful to my mental state. And my hematologist was amazing. He was like in his 70s and had seen a lot of things and was a really great man, actually. But he, they just didn't have any real options. And so I started going to yoga classes so I did yoga Nidra for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got better enough to walk, and that was sort of like a long process. And then there was a yoga studio in my neighborhood. So I went there, and this is actually worth telling if you're a yoga teacher, because I took a class on Monday, and then I came back the next Monday and the next Monday, and I could barely do anything. My teacher pulled me aside one day and said, "Wow, you're really improving." I said, "Yeah, well, I've been practicing." Because what I did is I went home and I did what she told me to do all week, and then I went back, because my only paradigm had been like music. I was a musician, like practicing it every day. So I just did that. And then she told me, "Well, no one else does that." I was like, "Oh, I didn't know." But anyway, long story long, I did all that, and I got a lot better. I had a really bad anxiety disorder, and that kind of cleared up. I lost a lot of.
You had that before.
Yeah, I was very anxious. I mean, that's why I did so much drugs and alcohol. And so I did that, and so I did a whole bunch of yoga, basically, just kind of like middle of the road hatha, breathing and moving, and yoga nidra. Those were my practices, and I started to lose weight too. I'd been really obese. Ended up losing 100 pounds and keeping it off. Wow. So I lost weight, but the most shocking thing to me was that I could sort of make choices and follow through on them. That was like the big takeaway for me. So of course, well, not of course, but I'm kind of an intense guy. So I got really excited, and I was like, this is
fanatical.
Amazing. I went to a yoga center. It was an ashram in New York, and I practiced there. And I became a yoga teacher, and I was like all in. And then I wanted to sort of share what I'd learned, and help people. And so I started sort of processing like what were the elements of this that really helped me. And then I met my yoga therapy teacher, Mukunda Stiles, who was like traveling around at the time. And so I took his school, which I think was one of 2 or 3 schools in the country at the time. Here.
Oh, really?
It wasn't really a thing, yoga therapy. And I mean, that just shows you how far it's come in the last 20 years. Nobody even heard of it. Now we get applications every day in my school. People are like, I want to be a yoga therapist. So it's really great. So I learned that, and then I started working with obese people and people with autoimmune conditions. And then it sort of continued from there. And, eventually I found myself with a full practice, which was amazing because nobody really did that. So I worked that way a long time. And then about 10 years ago, we started our school to train other yoga therapists.
Great.
I've been doing a mix of those 2 things ever since.
Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. That's really great. Yeah. I wanted to ask something about, what was it? There was something you said that was very interesting. It's just slipped my mind.
It'll come back.
It'll come back. Yeah.
It always does.
That's what it was. It was about the autoimmunity. Do you find that there's a kind of, it doesn't matter what kind of autoimmunity, there is an underlying thing that's at work?
I mean, it does matter. So yes, of course. I've been like sort of researching this for years now, and it kind of matters, but it more matters. We do sort of Ayurvedic approaches as well, and so the person matters, but the autoimmune disease does not matter. But there's some themes, like I've used yoga nidra a lot because it helped me, and so I started looking into that, and other meditational techniques for autoimmune diseases with really good success. So I've definitely seen a similarity, whether it's
because of the stress
lupus
level,
or I don't think it's the stress. I mean, it's part of it, but it's not the whole thing. So I think there's an energetic component, like a pranic component, that's really important to be addressed. And that basically involves that. And most people that I end up working with, not all, but like I'd say 70% have what they call in Ayurveda, like a pitta
constitution.
Excess. Not a constitution, but an excess.
The excess.
So so that's what's interesting. Sometimes it's a lot of the time they have a constitution too. So anyway, what that means is basically they're a certain kind of person with a certain makeup, and when we get that sort of evened out, which comes down to, if you want to boil it down to one thing, would be having people be a lot more sensitive and aware of like their internal situation earlier in the process. And that seems to really, I mean, I've seen like miraculous things, which are more fun to talk about, I guess. But on the whole, I've also seen people just manage their condition so well. Like people that are having, 11 flares of their condition a year go down to 2, or people, look more like that, is the typical result. But so, yeah, and there's a lot of interest in that because, as you know, like there's not a lot of help for autoimmune diseases. It's not.
Yeah, chronic things are difficult to treat because it's complex. Yeah.
And this is definitely, I think yoga therapy is definitely like a missing piece. But we're getting there. People, motivated people do yoga therapy for autoimmune diseases. It's not something that's like standard of care anywhere, at least.
Not yet.
I know of. Not yet. Give it 30 years and it will be.
I think sooner. I think this is one thing COVID is showing us. We have to activate our health. We can't just take it for granted. And that's what we've been doing for the last 100 years.
Yeah, and the other thing it's showing us is that, I mean, it is true that some people who are very healthy get COVID and have bad outcomes, but generally, no, generally people are, the less healthy you are, the less well it goes.
Yeah.
So we have a lot to say about that as yoga therapists.
Yeah. But okay, so tell us about the amazing things that you see happen. So you said that's much more interesting. So tell us.
Well, sometimes I don't like to lead with it because I don't want people to think like, oh,
you're a show off.
Therapy can cure everything. Because I don't, because I work with people all the time. But, I've seen, on all different levels. So like on the physical level, one of the things we work a lot with is back pathologies, because it's a common thing. And, so many times you see people that have gone through a sort of Western medical system, and then they end up with a yoga therapist, whether it's me or one of our people. I've seen people cancel their surgeries, get all better, transform, go from, a 5 to a 2 on the pain scale in 8 weeks, all these things that they just don't do with the Western model. And the other thing we see, we correct scoliosis curves, which, Dr. Frischman, another yoga therapist, actually proved you can do. And that's not part of the model at all, So on the physical level, we see that. And then when you get down to these chronic conditions like autoimmune diseases, or maybe like chronic fatigue syndrome, something I've worked a lot with, I've seen people. Is
that also autoimmune?
Yes, and maybe not a really. Cellular thing too. It's like a little misunderstood.
Yeah.
And from our point of view, maybe different in different people, because the diagnosis of like chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia and all these diagnoses aren't really specific. So when we work with someone as an individual, I've seen people with pain all over their body from fibromyalgia a year later have none.
Wow.
It gets me up every morning, and it's not true for everyone. And that's probably because everyone has different, reasons they got there. But for many people it is. So, that's really inspiring.
Do you also refer people to dietitians or nutritionists or functional medicine doctors?
Yeah, we do a lot of referrals. In my personal practice, I've studied Chinese medicine, herbalism, and nutrition for years. Wow. I don't tend to refer out as much as I used to on those subjects. The nutrition thing is the most interesting to me because, as a yoga therapist, what you get good at, if you're any good of it, I think, is habit change. It's like part of the process is how not only what someone should do, but how to get them to a place where they will do it. And nutritionists are often missing that piece. So I'm more concerned, it's great to tell somebody to eat a very specific diet, but the process of getting someone there is something that we kind of teased out so we've run obesity clinics for years, and that's something I've worked with for a long time. And so that's a process that I've thought about a lot and worked with a lot of people on. So, we refine that as yoga therapists, and we use the yoga to help people create habit change, which now neuroscience is proving, right? So sometimes somebody's path to a better diet might start with them moving and breathing or meditating, which is not
becoming more aware, body aware, and therefore the feeling of the food.
Right. Or also just having the ability, most people, if you spent years and years of your life trying to make change and failing, then those are the grooves you've put into your brain. So you're going to need to do something physical to change that. or you're just going to repeat the past. So for me, it's all together, as one big clump. But to answer your question, yes, we work with doctors. I really like sending people. I mean, if you watch my practicum, like for our school, I'm always saying, well, send them out, go get an MRI. Like the more information, the better.
You have, definitely.
Yeah, and definitely like diagnosis is the best part of
sending them off
the physical thing. Yeah, we don't have, I mean, I can't see what's wrong with their back. I don't know.
No.
I'm guessing, so yeah, we do a lot of that. And we never kind of disconnect from people's medical care. There's no real
No,
website
of course
that,
not.
No.
I agree.
So that's how I see it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, because in your story, so you were saying you had a lot of anxiety as already a young person. So I imagine there was trauma.
Sure.
Yeah. And
of course. And that's how we all got here.
Yeah. And so how do you feel that affected your choices in life, your confidence, your self-esteem, the emotions, and therefore creates those patterns? Yeah,
I mean, it's all about samskaras, as you say in yoga. It's all about how your experiences sort of implant in your consciousness. So I mean, I have my story, which if you want bullet points, I grew up, everything was cool, then my sister died, then my cousin, who was like my brother, died, my family fell apart, I did a whole bunch of drugs, and then I found myself at 30 dying. I mean, that's the super short version, but it's a lot of everyone has these things, challenges that they go through in different ways. And I didn't get the kind of help I needed at the time. I didn't really understand what was happening to me. And it was really the time, people didn't
talk about those sort of things.
Talk about those things. They didn't understand them. They didn't see interventions as being like super essential, to someone being healthy. So I never really learned, how to manage the effects of my trauma, for sure. And then, later on, I've kind of learned how to, get to the root of things in my own system, and deal with them.
Yeah. So it's like a emotional, psychological, mental kind of ignorance that we were living through, because I also have that experience.
Yeah, we didn't know. My parents didn't know.
No, exactly.
My parents, I think my mother actually told me she consulted a therapist, and he said, "Oh, don't send him to therapy." Like that was his advice, which is kind of absurd, but I don't know. I guess he just thought it would be better if I didn't do that at that moment. And I'm not sure what a therapist would have done based on the way people were being trained then too. It's like very different now, where we see people having like sort of thought through how you can, work with trauma not only in your mind but also in your body.
Yeah.
And get a good result.
Yeah.
So that's my personal experience, and I work with people. My first steps into working with trauma were not going direct, but I started working with obese people, and about a third of my clients had been sexually abused. So, and they would tell me, and so I was like, oh, I better take that into consideration. The way we're working now.
Yeah.
But I didn't see that coming. I hadn't thought of it from that direction before. But like your podcast, like most of my clients were women, and it was just sort of, it was like 70% women, my clients, and that's very common. So I started working with people and sort of thinking on my feet, and learning as much as I could about working with trauma from that angle.
Yeah, I read it in one of John Kabat-Zinn's books, that a lot of the people who are obese, it is to do with sexual abuse.
Right.
Yeah.
Fun fact is he's my neighbor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I live in a town in an area where there's so many yoga teachers and Buddhists, and
lucky you. So. Oh wow. Yeah, I love that guy. I love his voice and the way he talks, and he's been doing it so long. It's just charming to listen to him. Yeah.
He's great. And he's really contributed a lot in terms of
research.
the research,
Yeah.
him and Richie from, I guess, the University of Wisconsin, but don't quote me. But the two, there's just a lot of research that's been done that really push things forward in terms of people listening to us saying, meditation might be good for this.
Yeah.
That research was essential.
Yes, definitely.
And
yeah.
It's definitely changed the way when I work with people now, they come in like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Where 15 years ago, people were like, how is that going to help me? I don't even understand how any of this works. But it's very different. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
And do you see yoga therapy also as somatic work?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So we go at it from every angle. So the skill and the art of yoga therapy is, I think, figuring out which set of processes and which kind of angle is going to benefit your client the most. One person might meditate a lot and get a real benefit in terms of their working with their trauma, and somebody else that might be a terrible idea and a totally somatic approach is better. So it's an interesting job because you have to know so many things.
Well, that's what I loved. I watched one of your videos on trauma, and you were explaining and saying back saying that it was okay that we overstep the boundaries sometimes, because we do. Even as a therapist, you don't always have all the answers. So it's an exploration and to backtrack sometimes. And I thought it was really great that you just said that out loud, because it's true. There's moments where you think, oh, I've taken the wrong path. Yeah.
Right. It's not something you're supposed to say, I think. And I know the recording you're talking about because I did that. I remember speaking about that specifically because I've been watching, how this is evolving. It's so great. Like everything trauma sensitive is amazing what's happened in the last few years. But there's this little piece where it's almost like, you're not talking about people anymore. Like a yoga teacher, even, in a class, you're going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know about the people you're teaching, and you can't be afraid all the time. You still have to teach them down dog. And, what's important is that you've thought about what's possible if someone suffered.
Yeah.
Right. But you can't be fully responsible anyway. And the most important thing is that you know how to address it as opposed to prevent it. I think that's the big thing. And
and hold
sometimes
the
it's
space.
about saying, hold the space. And sometimes you say, I might have made a mistake. I might have made a mistake. I've been doing that for years because I had no choice, and I work on one-on-one with people. And I can tell anyone that's listening, I know a lot of yoga teachers listen to this. So, apologizing is a really powerful
good thing.
Thing.
It empowers you and them. Yeah.
It absolutely does. You say, I'm sorry.
I'm human.
I'm human, and I made a mistake, and I didn't know it would affect you poorly. And what can we do from here to make this better? And I've been noticing that's gone a little out of our vernacular, and people think they're supposed to know every single thing and be perfect. And I don't think that's great for practitioners. I think
it puts too much pressure on us.
Too much. Yeah. And I teach, sort of people learning to be yoga therapists. And I have to say, they're really nervous. They're like, this is really hard. I'm like, it is. It's definitely difficult. You can do it though.
Well, I think the whole point that we're learning, and that I see a lot about in the young people, is learning to be vulnerable, speaking honestly and being transparent, even as a therapist. So this morning I went with one of my clients to a psychotherapist. He wanted me to come along because it was a new person. And so even this psychotherapist, who's been doing this for more than 40 years, also said, we're going to try it out. I can't promise you it's going to work. And maybe we'll have to find one way or try something else. And I was like, wow, that's really nice that you can just say that.
Yeah, that's refreshing. Yeah. Well, you could tell they've worked a long time because there's really nothing else to say.
No.
This is about you and me.
You can't promise. You're just going to do your best, and that's it.
Yeah.
And he kept saying we're doing it together. It's our work. So.
Yeah. And that therapeutic relationship is so important. And especially as a yoga therapist, because you're kind of tasked with, helping somebody figure themselves out. So, there's no way to do that without having like a sort of strong, bond and relationship with them, I think.
Yeah, the sense of safety. Yeah.
For sure. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. Well, if you're not safe, you're not going to let anything move, right?
Oh, yeah, you're just holding
lock
on.
it all down. Yeah.
Okay. One more thing that I heard you say, or it was written somewhere, I think in your blog, was also about yoga nidra and iris. That I think you mentioned it just before, but I'd like you to explain maybe to people why sometimes it works for some and not for others, or it can actually trigger, especially in trauma, because
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the thing to know is that, yoga nidra is a skill. So if you don't know what yoga nidra is, there's a couple predominant styles of it. One is kind of walking yourself through what yoga considers your bodies. So it's like your body and your breath and your mind, your conscious thoughts, and then sort of moving into your unconscious part of yourself. And the other predominant style is you're in your body kind of rotating your consciousness. It means you're bringing your attention to all sorts of places in your body, and then maybe do the same thing with your thoughts. So Swami Saraswati kind of brought that in. If you ever get a chance, you should YouTube his, because I think he's speaking through a megaphone, and he's saying like, picture a bird and a small boy under a mango tree. Like, it's very kind of Indian, fun. But the point is that you're moving your attention around so that it doesn't get fixed in any one place. And there's a skill to that too. And then that changes many things, but it changes your own consciousness, and scientifically it changes your brainwave states. So it has some, proven efficacy that way. But it is a skill, and you have to feel safe doing it. You mentioned iris. I'm not an iris practitioner. I mean, I've done a bunch of their work, but they use kind of a what I consider like a souped up method of the Saraswati. They like kind of ran with it. For some people, they do these studies of like vets, here in the US that come back with PTSD, and a lot of them just have like these miraculous results with the practice. But what the studies don't talk about too much. And
this is what I heard you say.
Right. Well, there's a washout where people don't come back. So, working one-on-one, you realize that some people, like, they're not in a position where they can do that. They need a more, or even alone. It might be worse.
Okay.
So it might be better for them to have a more somatic experience. And we know from some new, like, kind of neuroscience work that trauma lives in the tissues and cells in different ways. And maybe that's the approach that has to, might work better for someone, or that might be better to do first.
Okay. Could you just say what that resource is, or plusieurs?
Well, if you read like The Body Keeps the Score, it's like Professor Berdukol. He's a professor. He's at BU maybe. I've
read that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of work around that where they're realizing, and if you've done any kind of somatic work, this. It's like somebody gets touched in a way, or moves in a way, and they'll have sometimes these like big releases. Sometimes they'll feel better. Sometimes it'll be very triggering. And people have been talking about this in this world forever, but now, and this is not something I'm an expert in terms of the science, but I've read the books like everybody else. But basically, it's, everyone used to think it was all in people's head, but it's not. Like, the way the mind communicates with the cells in the body is very complex. And what we do know is that they're connected. So where's, I think the thing to kind of take out of all that is where someone's going to be safe and be able to, in yoga, like unravel those samskaras, those past experiences, is going to be different for different people. So, in our school, we have a few different approaches we take. We kind of do experiments. We see what might work for people. We have some things in our assessments that would like point in one direction versus another, so we know where to start. That's how we do it. And we have pretty good results with that. And also, like you said, like from the get-go, saying, I would like to try this. Here's what it is. You don't have to do it. There's other ways to do it. But if you're a game, here's like 2 things we could try, and you can let me know what's more comfortable for you. And I do want to add to that, since you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with themselves, people have different skill levels and kind of abilities with different kinds of practices. which I know if you're a yoga therapist, because some people are going to be very body oriented and be able to go very deep that way. And other people are going to do way better if they get their body out of the way. So, we look at all of that for sure.
Yeah.
Not that you can ever get your body out of the way, just so you know.
But you can pretend it's not there. I mean?
Like maybe don't go straight there as your first stop on your educational journey.
Yeah. And slowly teaching people that it is a safe space.
Yeah, and that safety, that might take, for one person, that'll take 15 minutes, and someone else that might take 2.5 years. It just depends. And the other thing I think is interesting with trauma is that the trauma itself is not indicative of how the person has reacted to it. So you could have somebody with a story that you might consider like horrific, who is relatively okay, and somebody else who it seems like not such a big deal. Like I had somebody whose cat died that they were very close to, and it was extremely traumatic. And I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm just saying, I've had pets. I didn't react that way to my pets dying, but for her, it was a really important relationship, and she had PTSD, like legitimate.
Oh wow!
From this experience in her life. So you don't know, and you should never judge yourself. For sure, against other people, because it's different for everybody.
Yeah. Well, that's a good insight. Yeah. Thank you. Is there anything you want to share
about yoga therapy?
Yeah.
So many things. So many things. Well, I mean, for me, one of the reasons I'm on your podcast is I want people to understand how much help is available. And I think people are a little confused about yoga versus yoga therapy.
Oh, so please.
So, yoga classes, right? Yoga classes are amazing and can be therapeutic, but they are not geared towards individuals, and they are not geared towards people's individual experiences. They can't be, because there's too many people in the room. And there's lots of aspects to yoga. So, yoga therapists, if they're trained well, work with body and breath and philosophy and meditation and yoga nidra and, chanting, all sorts of techniques to get people healthier. And it works really well, but only if someone's paying enough attention to you to kind of assess what's going to get you where you want to go in the most efficient way. So I think a lot of people that have been helped through yoga have been helped
to a certain degree,
right? But it probably took longer than it needed to, just because it wasn't specific to them. So my experience was that, I went to yoga and I went to class, and
7 years,
7 years later, you're like, wow.
You wake up one day and you go, oh, my body actually affects my state of mind, and my state of mind affects my social life.
Who knew if I ate differently and thought differently and took care of myself differently, things would go differently. But it's my goal in life is really to get people to understand, if you come to a yoga therapist, you're going to get that 7 years maybe in one, or maybe in 6 months. Like that's our job, is to help you get there. Not that we have like magic, but we can make it very specific to you. And all the studies and all the amazing things that we're seeing in the yoga therapy world are just the tip of the iceberg, because they're all still based on yoga classes, right? So they take people who are depressed and they say, we gave them 3 yoga classes a week. And guess what? They were less depressed. And every yoga therapist goes, yeah, of course they were. Like, of course they were. But, if you go to a yoga therapist, you're going to get a quicker, sort of more powerful drug, so to speak, right?
Yeah, it's personalized and
Yeah. And so, since you asked, that's what I want everyone to hear, that is available. It's researched, it's around, there's, it's growing all the time. Like when we started our school, we were one of the first, I think, 20 schools. that offered this kind of large degree we offer, and now there's 68, wow. And I'm sure next year there'll be 120, and it's just
exponential.
Nobody, when I started yoga therapy, I'd say I'm a yoga therapist, and people would say, what is yoga and what is a yoga therapist? And now they either say, oh, I love yoga, what's a yoga therapist? Or they even say, oh, yoga therapy, that's super interesting. And I almost want to cry because I've spent the last 20 years describing what this is.
Wow. Well, I've been describing it for about 4 years, and I'm already like fed up.
Right, because for us, we talk about it every day. We're like, of course you know what it is, but nobody knows what there's only in the IOIT, which is like an organization of yoga therapists, I think there's like 6,000 members on Earth.
Is it? Oh, wow.
That's it. But that's on the entire planet. So it's not like there's, it's where
not
I
huge.
Live. No, but in the US and Canada, which is what I mostly know about, there are yoga therapists everywhere. I mean, I personally have like 9 students in Nova Scotia right now.
Oh, wow.
Which is tiny. Nobody lives there. So, I mean, you can find yoga therapists if you look, but you have to be looking. But anyway, help is available, especially for chronic conditions. I would highly recommend, if you have appendicitis, maybe not make us our first call, but for chronic conditions, I would definitely put a yoga therapist in your ranks.
Yeah. I've also had amazing results, like someone with autoimmune disease, CREST. Have you ever heard of CREST syndrome?
Yes.
So it's calcinosis, Raynaud's, esophageal problems, and
all together.
And bipolar. And we work just with Ayurvedic, so I work a little with Ayurveda. I'm a consultant, a bit on her diet, and then practices accordingly. And she went into remission for 9 months, like absolutely no flare-ups. And it was only when something very traumatic happened that it triggered the whole thing again. But it's amazing to just watch how a body can go back into that healing and restoring itself.
I mean, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't experienced it for myself. And so now I guess our job is to tell people before they end up in the ICU, or you don't have to go all the way.
We can be nicer to ourselves. I think that's also cultural. We wait till we're so desperate before we ask for help. We don't.
And that's the Ayurveda thing too, right? Like catching things like, 5 steps before Western medicine would even say you're sick, right? Like, like mental health is a great example. Like, I mean, you're experiencing anxiety in a not maybe great way. And what in the West we do is we just wait till we have we're literally at a point of a clinical diagnosis, which is you've gotten really way too far. You could have worked with that 10 steps ago. And I think it's just that people don't know. And it does take a little time. You have to be interested in
working on yourself.
Self-exploration. But maybe you should be anyway, but I guess that's for another conversation.
Yes, let's leave that there. Okay. Do you want to leave us with a short practice, Brandt?
Sure. I think walking yourself through what's called the koshas is a kind of important way to integrate the different aspects of yourself. And, you can definitely do that through a long period. But if you can give me 5 minutes, I can give the super short version if that's
That'd be great. I'll mute myself. Okay.
Okay. So in this practice, we'll be really bringing awareness to different parts of ourselves, our body, our breath, our thoughts, spaces between our thoughts, so that we can achieve something called witness consciousness, which is really looking at yourself while not being involved with all your processes. And in this way, we can let our systems move naturally and heal. So to begin, you can be in any position. Probably the 2 most common positions would be sitting up comfortably, but if you'd like to lie down, that's fine too. You really want to be in a position where you're really comfortable and your body won't be an issue the next 5 minutes. And as you sit or lie here, get a sense of your body. You could even imagine yourself looking at your body from outside of it. So see yourself sitting or lying down. And then notice if there's any sensation in your body. See if your mind's eye is drawn to any sensations in the body. And if you find any, just notice them. You don't have to do anything particular. Just notice the sensations in your body. If that for a moment makes you adjust your body, that's absolutely fine. And then say to yourself, I have a body. And send that body some positive thoughts. So you could say, thank you for this body, or my body is peaceful, anything that resonates with you. And then let's move our attention to our breath. So notice that you're breathing. You might notice sensation at the nostrils. Without doing anything to change your breath, you might notice that your belly is very slightly moving as you breathe in and out. And you can even help yourself identify that more by, as you breathe in, just say to yourself, I'm breathing in. And as you breathe out, say to yourself, I'm breathing out. We'll do that for a few rounds of breath. And let's move our attention to our mind and especially our thoughts. Simply notice that you're thinking. Doesn't matter what we're thinking about. Let each thought just come and go on its own. See if you can witness your thoughts moving in and out of your consciousness without getting in the way. Notice that you're thinking. Now notice that there's not only thoughts, but there's space between our thoughts. So you might see one thought arise, then there's a little space, and then that thought subsides as another one arises again. We're going to spend just a moment noticing the space between the thoughts. As we're noticing that space, we might also notice that we can not only see our thoughts and the space. So we can pan back, notice our thoughts, notice the space between our thoughts, witnessing our own mind. As a final gesture, we'll thank ourselves for doing this practice. So witnessing the space and the thoughts, even as you hear my voice, to say to yourself, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was also very lovely. You've also got a very calming voice.
Thank you. It's amazing how just a couple moments of walking through your systems can change your perspective.
Completely. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and meet you and talk to whoever's listening to your podcast. It's lovely that you're doing this and spreading the word. So
and I love doing this because I meet all these amazing, wonderful, good people. Yeah,
lovely. I've met so many amazing people in the years I've been doing this.
Yeah, I bet.
Great souls, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you, Brandt, and thank you, listeners. We're just going to end here. Do you want to say anything? Tell people about your projects or your work, where they can find you.
Sure.
I'll put it all in the show notes. But
sure, that's nice of you. So we have a school called Breathing Deeply. It's at breathingdeeply.com, and there you'll find we train people to be yoga teachers and yoga therapists. We also have a practicum if you're looking for yoga therapy help. You can work with one of your yoga therapists for money, and we have a practicum where you can work with students at the end of their training for free, so that might be interesting.
Oh, wow.
We also have a program called the Radically Balanced Yogi, which kind of walks you through 6 weeks of finding the best practices for you, and that's free.
Wow.
And we have a meditation school that's not completely free, but like the first month is free, so you could try that out. So there's
lots of free stuff.
There's lots of free stuff. So I'd encourage you to go to breathingdeeply.com and just see what we have to offer. And if you know someone that's suffering, please send them our way. We'd be happy to try to help them.
Okay, wonderful. I definitely will. Thank you, Brandt.
Thank you.
Thank you so wonderful you're doing this work. Yeah.
You too. Shanti.
Shanti. So thank you everyone for staying to the end of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I really love doing these talks with these amazing people. And if you want to know more, just take a look in the show notes. There's plenty of links and ways to connect with either the guest or myself. If you want to work with us or find out more about us, just check out the information in the show notes. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend or week, and you'll be hearing from me next week. Bye.